welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something pretty huge, but really essential, the AI Index Report 2024.
Right.
Think of it as, cutting through all the noise around artificial intelligence to get to the absolute core trends and insights you need to know right now. We've basically sifted through a mountain of data so you don't have to.
Exactly. And we've looked at research from, well, all over Georgetown University, code.org, OpenAI, Google, loads more to try and give you a real solid understanding of where AI actually stands.
Yeah.
It's not just a quick skim. It's meant to be a proper exploration, bringing some clarity to this incredibly fast-moving field.
And that's really our goal for you listening, to come away with a clear, kind of concise picture of today's AI landscape, from the big research breakthroughs to how it's starting to impact, well, how we live and work. We're aiming for those surprising links, those sort of aha moments that might just, shift how you see things a bit. Okay, let's dive right in. The engine room, research and development.
Right. So what immediately jumps out, I think, is the continued strong role of industry. They're really driving the most visible AI advancements.
Still industry leading the charge.
Yeah, very much so. And in 2023, companies were behind 51 notable machine learning models. Compare that to just 15 from academia.
51 versus 15? Okay.
It really highlights where a lot of that cutting-edge development is happening right now.
So with industry so far ahead, does that mean academic research is fading away, or is it just changing? Seems like there's still a connection there.
No, that's a really crucial point. Actually, the collaborations between industry and academia, they hit a new high in 2023.
Oh, really?
Yeah, resulted in 21 notable models, so it strongly suggests that synergy, that partnership between them, is incredibly important for pushing the boundaries.
Okay, so it's not either. And it's not just a few models popping up, is it? I heard the number of foundation models just exploded.
That's right, and more than doubled. In 2023, we saw 149 new foundation models released compared to the year before.
Yeah, 149.
And what's really interesting, I think, for accessibility and maybe innovation is that a big chunk, almost 66% of these new ones were open foundation models.
So more open source.
Yeah, exactly. That trend towards more open AI could really democratize things, open up development.
It sounds like the pace is just relentless. But you have to wonder, what's the price tag for all this innovation at the very top end?
The cost is substantial, and it's growing.
Right.
Just to give you a sense, training something like OpenAI's GPT-4, the estimate is around $78 million in compute costs.
$78 million just for compute.
Just compute. And Google's Gemini Ultra, maybe even more, thought to be around $191 million.
Good grief. Those numbers really underscore the kind of resources you need to play at that frontier level.
Absolutely.
It makes you think about who can actually afford to compete. Geographically, where's most of this top-tier research happening?
Well, currently, the United States has a pretty significant lead. In 2023, 61 of those notable AI models came from U.S.-based institutions.
61.
Okay. Yeah, that puts them quite a bit ahead of, say, the EU and the UK. Shows a real concentration of advanced AI development over there.
So the U.S. is definitely leading the pack for now. But all this training, it just eats data, doesn't it? Are we running out of training data? Is that a real concern?
That's a very, very relevant question. And the AI Index report actually digs into this. There are projections suggesting high-quality language data. We could hit scarcity as early as this year, 2024.
This year? Wow.
Yeah. Lower quality language data might last maybe another couple of decades. And even image data, the projections suggest we might largely use that up sometime between the late 2030s and mid-2040s.
That's actually quite startling. So is synthetic data the answer? AI generating its own training stuff?
Well, it's an answer or a potential one, but it's not perfect. It comes with its own set of challenges.
Like what?
There's this phenomenon called model collapse. You can kind of think of it like making photocopies of photocopies. Each copy gets a little bit worse, a little less sharp. Models trained mostly on synthetic data generated by other AI, can start to produce outputs that are less diverse, less innovative, more limited over time.
Ah, right. It sort of feeds on itself and gets narrower.
Exactly. So it really highlights that we still absolutely need real human-generated data to keep things fresh and grounded.
That makes sense. Need that outside input.
Yeah.
Okay, shifting slightly. Where are the developers actually working on this stuff? Where's the global community most active?
If you look at GitHub, the big coding platform, the United States is the biggest contributor to AI-related projects, almost 23% in 2023.
Okay.
But India is a very strong second with 19%. So it shows really significant global engagement, lots of developer interest worldwide.
Right. Interesting distribution.
Okay.
Okay, so we've looked at the R&D landscape, the who, where, and how. Now let's get into what all this effort actually achieves. Technical performance. What can AI do now that maybe it couldn't before? Can it beat us at things?
Well, yes, in some areas. It's actually quite remarkable. The report points out that AI has now officially surpassed human performance on a range of tasks across 9 different AI benchmarks.
9 benchmarks. Like what kind of tasks?
Things like image classification, basic reading comprehension, visual reasoning, some pretty fundamental abilities where AI is now demonstrably better than the average human baseline on those specific tests.
That's a huge step, isn't it? Feels like just yesterday we were amazed by chess computers. But how do we even measure these newer generative models, the ones making text and images? It seems harder to benchmark.
It is harder, and that's leading to a shift. There's a definite trend towards using more human evaluation.
Asking people.
Exactly. Instead of just relying on automated scores, benchmarks are increasingly incorporating human feedback. Think of the chatbot arena leaderboard.
Right, where people vote on which chatbot response is better.
Precisely. People directly compare them. It reflects that ultimately how humans perceive these models and their usefulness is becoming really important.
Makes sense. And it's not just about chatbots or images, is it? AI is getting more involved in the physical world, too, through robotics.
Yes, definitely. Integrating large language models, LLMs, with robots is making them much more flexible and capable.
How so?
Well, models like Polym and RT2 allow robots to understand more complex commands, even kind of reason about their environment, and interestingly, even ask clarifying questions if they're unsure.
Asking questions. That's a big leap from just following fixed instructions.
It really is. It moves them towards much more effective interaction with the real, messy world.
Sounds like sci-fi becoming real.
Mm.
But we also know these LLMs aren't always right, are they?
Yeah.
What's the latest on factuality, the whole hallucination problem?
Yeah, that remains a major challenge. Ensuring LLMs are actually truthful is still a big hurdle. They are definitely still prone to generating these hallucination stuff that sounds plausible, maybe even confident, but is just wrong.
And that have real consequences, right?
Absolutely. The fact that these kinds of errors have even popped up in things like legal filings really underlines how critical it is to improve reliability. Benchmarks like Truthful QA and HalloEvil are specifically trying to measure and push progress on this.
Okay, so still a work in progress on the truthfulness front. What about generating images from text? That area seems to have exploded recently.
It really has. We've seen incredible progress, and alongside the models, we're getting more sophisticated ways to evaluate them, like the IM benchmark.
IM, what does that look at?
It assesses models on multiple things: how well the image matches the text prompt, the actual visual quality, the aesthetic appeal, originality, that sort of thing.
And who's winning there?
Well, it's interesting. OpenAI's DALL-E 2 scored highly overall, but another model, Dreamlike Photorial, which is actually based on the open model Stable Diffusion, came out top specifically for image quality, aesthetics, and originality.
Huh, interesting nuances. And it's not just flat images anymore, right? 3D is becoming a thing, too.
Absolutely. Models like MV-Dream are tackling the much harder problem of creating 3D shapes just from text descriptions.
That sounds complicated.
It is. You have to worry about things like making sure it looks consistent from all angles. And we're also seeing progress in editing existing images using text prompts that's evaluated by things like the EditVal benchmark, and even editing 3D objects directly with text commands using models like Instructor F2 near RF, which seems to be getting better at making consistent changes.
Wow, editing 3D models just by typing. The pace is just incredible. What about video? That seems even more complex.
Video generation is definitely another frontier seeing rapid advancement. Models like Emu Video are showing really high quality, according to human evaluators, and they're pretty good at sticking to the text prompt.
And presumably better data helps here, too.
For sure. The increasing availability of large-scale datasets like Skulltech 3D for 3D reconstruction from multiple views is absolutely crucial fuel for innovation in all these visual areas.
Okay, so generating content is one thing, but what about tasks needing more, complex reasoning, thinking, problem solving?
Yeah, that's a really critical area of AI research. Benchmarks like MMMU are designed to push the limits here.
MMU.
It tests AI's ability to understand and reason across lots of different fields of knowledge, using both text and images together, kind of like a very hard, multimodal university exam.
Right. And how's AI doing on, say, math?
Remarkably well, actually, especially recently. For instance, a version of GPT-4 got, I think, 97% accuracy on the GSM-8K benchmark.
Which is?
Grade school math word problems. That's still 97% is impressive. And on the much harder math dataset, another GPT-4-based model solved over 84% of the problem.
84% on advanced math problems.
Yeah.
That's really something. It sounds like AI is becoming a serious tool for technical problem solving.
It definitely seems to be heading that way.
What about more sort of everyday reasoning, common sense?
Yeah, visual common sense reasoning, often tested with benchmarks like VCR, is seeing steady progress too. And interestingly, there's also more research popping up exploring how well AI models align with human moral judgments.
Moral judgments. How do they even test that?
Well, one study suggested models like GPT-4 showed a greater degree of agreement with human moral sentiments compared to older models. It's complex and maybe controversial, but it's being looked at.
Definitely complex.
And related to reasoning, there's also work on understanding cause and effect causality using datasets like the Tubidin cause-effect pairs, trying to get AI to understand why things happen, not just what correlates with what.
Fascinating. Okay, we've covered text, images, video, reasoning. What about audio, music, and speech?
Audio generation has also taken some big leaps. We've seen the release of models like Uni Audio, Musigen, NotebookLM.
Right, I've heard of those.
Yeah, they can create pretty convincing synthetic speech, but also music. And the release of new datasets like Music Caps, which has lots of music paired with text descriptions, is really helping to drive progress, especially in music generation.
So AI is getting pretty good across all these different types of information. We've talked about specific skills, but what about AI systems that are designed to be more general, like agents that could do lots of different things?
Right, the idea of more general-purpose AI agents is definitely gaining traction. It's a hot area.
How do you evaluate something like that?
Well, new benchmarks are being developed specifically for this, like Agent Bench and MLagent Bench. And we're seeing agents being built for specific challenging tasks, like Voyager.
Voyager.
Yeah, it's an agent designed to continuously learn and explore complex, open-ended environments like the game Minecraft. And we already mentioned PaLM-E, which shows how language models can give robots more general capabilities for interacting with the physical world.
So it feels like we're inching towards more autonomous, versatile AI. Are there any weird or surprising things we're learning about these big models as they get better?
Yeah, there are some intriguing properties. One is this idea of emergent abilities.
Emergent abilities. What's that?
Capabilities that seem to sort of suddenly appear once models reach a certain size or complexity, things they weren't explicitly trained for. Although the report does note that how apparent these are might depend quite a bit on how you measure performance.
So maybe an illusion of the metrics sometimes.
Possibly, or at least exaggerated by the metrics. Another finding, which is maybe a bit concerning for practical use, is that the performance of even the same LLM can actually fluctuate over time.
Really? You'd expect it to be stable once trained.
You might think so, but studies suggest performance isn't always consistent, something users probably need to be aware of. There's also research looking into whether LLMs can self-correct their mistakes, which is, a potentially useful capability.
Okay. And what about the whole open source versus closed source debate? Is there still a performance cap?
Based on the research reviewed in the report, yes, there currently still seems to be a noticeable performance gap. Generally, the top closed proprietary models still outperform the best open models on many benchmarks.
Right.
But related to that, there's tons of research into making all LLMs better. Things like new prompting techniques like OPRO, optimization by prompting fine-tuning models on specific data, and also developing much more efficient ways to run them.
More efficient. Like faster or cheaper?
Both, ideally.
Yeah.
Techniques like flash decoding, for example, aim to significantly cut down the cost and time it takes to actually use the model, the inference part.
That seems really important for making them more practical. Finally, on the technical side, we can't really ignore the environmental cost, can we? The carbon footprint of all this AI.
No, and it's getting more attention. There's a positive trend, actually, towards more transparency about the greenhouse gas emissions from training these massive models. Companies are starting to report that more.
That's good.
But There's still a big gap in reporting the emissions from actually using the models day to day, the inference costs. And that could potentially be an even larger part of the overall environmental impact long term. We just don't have enough data on it yet.
Right, the ongoing running costs, environmentally speaking.
Uh-huh.
Okay, let's pivot now to the economy. 2023 felt like a massive year for AI hitting the business world. What were some of the big headlines?
It really was a landmark year economically. You saw huge investments pouring into AI companies. Think Inflection AI, Anthropic getting massive funding rounds.
Yeah.
Plus, major product launches integrating AI like Microsoft 365 Copilot, Salesforce's Joule Assistant, and even big names like Kai-Fu Lee launching initiatives around open source LLMs specifically for commercial use. It all signals this accelerating wave of AI hitting the economy.
And presumably that drives demand for people who actually know how to build and use this stuff, AI skills in the job market.
Absolutely huge demand. In 2023, the U.S. actually had the highest proportion of online job postings that mentioned AI skills.
Still leading there. Any shifts within the U.S.?
Yeah, interestingly, while California still has the biggest share overall, its percentage actually dipped slightly compared to 2019. States like Texas saw a small increase, so maybe a bit of geographic diversification happening.
And globally. Where's the hiring growing fastest?
Looking at year-over-year growth and the relative rate of AI hiring, some countries that stood out were Chile, South Africa, and India. They saw really significant jumps.
Interesting. So demand is high, but what about the actual supply of skills? Which workforces have the most AI-skilled people right now?
According to the data analyzed, India, the US, and Germany currently show the highest penetration of AI skills within their workforces. That's where you find the highest percentage of workers listing AI-related abilities.
Got it. And the investment side, all that money pouring in, where's it mostly coming from and where's it going?
Private investment is still the dominant force, much more than public funding. And in terms of where it's going, areas like generative AI specifically have attracted enormous investor interest. That cash is really fueling the fire in those subfields.
So investors are betting big on generative AI. Are companies actually adopting AI technologies widely now?
Yes, the trend is definitely upwards. The percentage of organizations saying they've adopted AI in some form is steadily increasing across basically all regions, developing markets, China, North America, Europe, Asia Pacific. It's becoming more mainstream.
How's it affecting software developers? You'd think they'd be early adopters.
They are. AI is becoming deeply embedded in their workflows. A large majority report using AI tools for writing code,
Makes sense.
and many also use it for debugging, writing documentation, that kind of thing. There's also growing interest in using AI for code testing, although actual adoption there is still a bit lower compared to code writing.
Okay, so it's like a coding assistant for
Yeah.
many developers now. What about other jobs? Is AI actually making people better at their work?
We're starting to see studies on this now, and the initial findings suggest yes, it can. One study looked at consultants, for example. It found that those who used AI saw pretty significant performance gains. And interestingly, the gains might have been even larger for the lower-skilled consultants, potentially helping them catch up, sort of leveling the playing field a bit.
That's fascinating. Not just helping the top performers, but maybe boosting everyone. Are companies actually talking about AI more in their official communications, like earnings calls?
Oh, absolutely. Mentions of AI in corporate earnings calls have just surged, and mentions of generative AI specifically went through the roof in 2023.
Right.
It really shows how central AI is becoming to business strategy, or at least how much companies want to talk about it to investors.
Definitely a hot topic. Finally, on the economy, everyone's trying to guess the future impact. What are the projections saying? Is AI going to transform everything?
Well, predicting the future is always tricky, isn't it? But yes, there are analyses trying to estimate the potential economic effects. McKinsey, for example, did a big study on how generative AI might reshape industries and boost productivity.
And the general feeling is,
The specifics vary, but generally, most projections point towards a really substantial economic impact in the coming years and decades. How exactly it plays out is still uncertain, but the potential seems huge.
okay, substantial impact expected. Now, let's shift gears again. AI isn't just changing business, it's also making huge strides in science and medicine. 2023 felt like a big year there, too.
It really was. AI's role in speeding up scientific discovery just became even clearer.
What are some examples?
Oh, there were quite a few standout achievements highlighted. Things like AlphaDev from Google DeepMind, finding more efficient sorting algorithms, fundamental computer science stuff.
Right.
FlexCubes optimizing 3D mesh generation for graphics and engineering. Synbot, which is an AI system that automates complex chemical synthesis planning,
Automating chemistry experiments.
essentially planning them, yeah. Then there's GraphCast for better global weather forecasting, GenoME discovering millions of potential new stable material,
I am.
millions of new stable crystal structures, computationally predicted, and also AI being used for more accurate flood forecasting. Just a really diverse range of scientific applications.
That list is incredible, truly accelerating science across the board.
Mhm.
What about medicine specifically? Any major AI systems launched last year?
Yes, several significant ones. There was EV Escape, designed to help predict pandemic potential by looking at viral mutations. Alphamissence, which helps classify the impact of genetic mutations, whether they're likely to be harmful or benign.
That sounds vital for genetic medicine.
It is. Also Synthesar, which uses AI to create higher resolution brain scans from lower resolution ones, potentially making diagnosis easier. And even new sensor technology using AI-coupled plasmonic infrared sensors, showing promise for detecting neurodegenerative diseases earlier.
Amazing potential there. We often hear about AI helping with diagnosis. How good is it getting on, say, medical exams?
It's improving dramatically. MedQA benchmark tests clinical knowledge, kind of like a medical licensing exam. The top model in 2023, which was GPT-4 MedPrompt, a specialized version, achieved over 90% accuracy. That's a massive jump from previous years.
90% on a medical knowledge test.
Yeah.
Well, that's approaching expert human levels in some ways, isn't it?
On that specific benchmark, yes, it's very impressive progress.
Were there other notable medical AI advances?
Yeah, things like Immunosera for helping design antibodies, CODOC for improved detection of pneumonia from test x-rays, CT-Panda for earlier pancreatic cancer detection. The applications are really broadening.
And are these systems actually getting approved for use?
Yes, the trend of FDA approvals for AI-enabled medical devices is continuing. It shows a growing regulatory acceptance and real-world integration of AI into healthcare workflows.
Even something as complex as a doctor-patient conversation, is AI involved there too?
People are working on it. Models like Metaline are being developed specifically for medical dialogue scenarios.
How do you even evaluate that?
It's tricky. It often requires a mix using human doctors to rate the conversations, alongside automated metrics like Comet that try to assess quality and relevance. It's an active area of research.
Right, evaluating conversation is hard.
Yeah.
Okay, let's look at education. Another area with massive potential for AI. What were the key trends in 2023?
Well, at the university level in computer science and AI fields, there were some interesting dynamics.
Like what?
A slight dip in international student enrollment in the US and Canada, maybe due to visa issues or lingering pandemic effects. Also, the job market for new computer science professors became super competitive. More candidates were actually turning down faculty job offers.
Really? Why? More attractive industry jobs.
That's likely a big part of it, yeah. Though, interestingly, the overall career paths for new CS PhDs didn't change drastically. A majority still went into academic positions initially.
Okay. What about schools? K-12 education. Are teachers actually using tools like ChatGPT?
Yes, definitely starting to. Surveys show a growing number of K-12 teachers are using these AI tools.
For what kinds of things?
Mostly things like helping with lesson planning, brainstorming creative ideas for class activities, maybe even brushing up on subject knowledge. Practical assistance, basically.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And the report also touched on diversity in education, right? Any key findings there?
Yes, it looks at a few aspects. For individuals with disabilities in post-secondary AI education, the numbers reported remain relatively low and haven't changed much year on year.
Okay.
Gender diversity in CS PhD programs shows a mixed picture. Some countries, like the UK, Germany, Switzerland, seem to be making some progress narrowing the gap. In other places, the gap actually widened slightly. And in the US, looking at who takes AP computer science exams, there are still persistent racial and ethnic disparities in representation. That remains an ongoing challenge for the field.
Right. Lots of work still needed on the diversity front across the board. Okay, let's shift now to policy and governance. 2023 felt like a really busy year for governments trying to get a handle on AI.
It absolutely was a huge amount of activity globally.
What were the big moments?
Well, in the U.S., you had the White House releasing its blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights, followed later by the Comprehensive Executive Order on AI.
Right, that got a lot of attention.
Then the U.K. hosted the first major international AI safety summit, which led to the Bletchley Declaration, with many countries signing on. And the EU continued its steady progress on finalizing its landmark AI Act. Lots of significant moves.
It really feels like governments woke up to the fact they need to do something. Are we seeing more laws being passed both in the U.S. and globally?
Definitely seeing more legislative activity. The number of AI-related bills being introduced and discussed is increasing significantly.
What kinds of areas are these laws covering?
It's really broad. In the U.S., you see bills touching on national security, defense, but also civil rights, commerce, education, healthcare, tech regulation. It cuts across many sectors. And globally, more and more countries are developing their own national AI strategies to coordinate their approach.
Within the U.S. government, which parts are most involved in these discussions? Which committees?
Looking at congressional committee activity, some of the ones showing high engagement with AI topics include the House Administration Committee, the Small Business Committee, Natural Resources, and the Judiciary Committee. It shows that AI's impact is being considered from many different angles.
Interesting spread. What about the style of regulation? Is the U.S. approach different from, say, the EU's?
Generally speaking, yes. Over the last few years, the EU's approach, culminating in the AI Act, has been more comprehensive and, some would say, restrictive or prescriptive, trying to set broad rules for different risk levels of AI.
Okay.
The U.S. federal approach, so far, has been maybe more varied, sector-specific, and perhaps less top-down comprehensive, though the executive order points towards more coordination. State-level activity in the U.S. is also really picking up, creating a complex patchwork.
Right, that U.S. federal versus state dynamic. Are governments also putting their money where their mouth is, investing in AI R&D?
Yes, particularly in the U.S., federal funding for non-defense AI R&D has generally been increasing.
That's positive.
Although it's worth noting that a lot of that funding actually flows out through contracts to private companies to deliver specific things, rather than just funding basic research directly in government labs or universities.
Got it. So funding is up, but often contracted out. And you mentioned state-level activity is increasing.
Yes, definitely seeing more AI-related bills and initiatives popping up in state legislatures across the U.S. It reflects that AI issues are seen as relevant at all levels of governance now.
Okay. And just to loop back quickly, the report also touched on diversity, specifically within the AI field itself, not just education.
Yes, briefly. It mainly pulls data related to education, like the PhD, gender diversity, and AP exam demographics we mentioned. It highlights those ongoing disparities as relevant to the diversity of the future AI workforce, underscoring the need for continued efforts to broaden participation.
Understood. Okay, let's move to public opinion. How are people feeling about AI as it becomes more prominent?
Well, the surveys suggest growing unease, actually.
Unease, not excitement.
There's excitement, too. But globally, the percentage of people saying they feel nervous about AI products and services saw a noticeable increase between 2022 and 2023.
Huh. Does it vary by country?
Massively.
Yeah.
How people weigh the potential benefits versus the drawbacks of AI differs a lot, depending on where they live. Some countries are much more optimistic than others.
What about specific tools? Everyone talks about ChatGPT. How many people actually know about it or use it?
Awareness is pretty high globally, around 63% in the surveys reported. Countries like India, Kenya, Indonesia had particularly high awareness.
And usage?
About 17% of users worldwide said they use it daily, but again, big variations. Daily usage was much higher in places like India, Pakistan, and Kenya compared to, say, Europe or North America.
Interesting global differences. What are the main things people are worried about when it comes to AI?
The big concerns that come up repeatedly are things like potential bias and discrimination being baked into AI systems, the risk of job losses due to automation, and also worries about unequal access, that the benefits of AI might not be shared fairly. These are really shaping the public conversation.
Definitely key issues. Finally, what about social media? What can we learn from what people are saying online about AI?
Looking at social media data from 2023, it's clear that big AI model releases drive huge waves of conversation.
Like GPT-4.
Exactly. GPT-4 dominated discussion for much of the year, but newer models like Stable Diffusion, Google's Gemini, Elon Musk's Grok, they all generated significant buzz too, with lots of debate about their capabilities, limitations, and the sentiment around them varying quite a bit.
So lots of online chatter tracking the latest developments. Well, that has truly been quite the deep dive. We've covered a massive amount of ground from the AI Index Report 2024.
We certainly have.
It's just crystal clear, isn't it? The pace of AI development and deployment is just phenomenal, and it's touching pretty much everything: research, business, science, daily life.
Absolutely. And trying to get a handle on these key trends, like we've discussed, is just so important for everyone now, whether it's for your job or just out of sheer curiosity about where things are headed.
Yeah,
Hopefully, this exploration has offered some useful insights into this incredibly dynamic landscape.
definitely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe a final thought for everyone listening. Given everything we've heard, the incredible speed, the growing power, the challenges, what's the single biggest question that all this raises for you personally about AI's role in our future?
Hmm, that's a good one to ponder.
Yeah, something to reflect on, maybe dig deeper into an area that particularly caught your attention today.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the AI Index Report 2024.
And thank you for tuning in to The Deep Dive.